Sometimes the worst moments of our lives are just the universe preparing us for who we're meant to become. The polished marble floor felt like ice against Henry Cole's cheek. The cold, a cruel bite through the thin fabric of his chambray shirt. A dull throb pulsed behind his eyes, a relentless counterpoint to the sharper, agonizing ache in his shoulder where security, with practiced brutality, had twisted his arm. Above him, the fluorescent lights of the First Agricultural Bank of Homestead hummed, casting a sterile, indifferent glow on the blurred faces that now stared down at him. Two burly guards, their starched uniforms a mockery of protection, held him firm, their grip bruising, their faces impassive. He could hear the hushed whispers, sharp and cutting, punctuated by a snicker from a young teller, echoing in the cavernous lobby, each sound a fresh laceration to his dignity. His simple, dust-flecked clothes, the worn denim and scuffed boots, screamed nobody to them, a narrative they'd eagerly embraced, their judgment a palpable, suffocating weight. They saw a nuisance, an old beggar, a transient, perhaps a little confused, a man unworthy of their pristine halls. They thought he was a nobody. They had no idea whose bank this really was, whose lifeblood had seeped into its very foundations. The security guards tightened their hold, preparing to heave him to his feet, a final, unceremonious act of expulsion. Henry, grounded by the crushing weight of their contempt, felt the world tilt, but deep within, a dormant fire began to stir, slow and deliberate, a prelude to the seismic shift to come. That morning, the sun had risen over Homestead County with its usual stoic grace, painting the eastern sky in hues of soft orange and rose. Henry Cole had walked out of his modest farmhouse, the kind of place that had weathered generations of sun and storm, its porch swing creaking a slow, rhythmic song in the gentle breeze. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of rich, dark earth freshly turned for planting, a smell that had been the backdrop to his entire life, an anchor in a world increasingly unmoored. He wore a faded chambray shirt, jeans patched at the knee, and his trusty, worn-out boots, the kind that mold to your feet over decades, becoming an extension of yourself, silent witnesses to countless seasons of labor. He hadn't seen the need for a suit, not for this. He was simply going to his bank, the one he had painstakingly built, brick by brick, vision by vision, over more than 50 years, a titan of rural finance that had grown from a desperate dream into a formidable regional institution. The town of Homestead was slowly stirring to life around him. The diner, Peggy's Plates, already had its open sign lit, and the aroma of brewing coffee and frying bacon wafted through the main street, a comforting scent that spoke of routine and community. The hardware store proprietor was hosing down the sidewalk, sending rivulets of water glinting in the early light, while the general store was unlocking its heavy oak door, announcing the start of another day. Henry nodded to Mr. Henderson from the hardware store, offered a quiet "mornin', Earl" to a farmer loading sacks of feed into his pickup. He was a familiar, if somewhat overlooked, fixture in Homestead, a man who blended into the rural landscape, a testament to the quiet dignity of a life lived close to the land, connected to its rhythms, its hardships, and its profound, often unseen, rewards. He moved through the familiar tableau like a ghost in his own history, observing the small rituals that defined the community he had helped build. He continued his measured pace, the rhythmic scuff of his boots on the pavement a steady percussion in the quiet morning, a counterpoint to the distant lowing of cattle. The First Agricultural Bank of Homestead stood prominently at the corner of Main Street and Elm, a solid stone building that had once symbolized hope and prosperity for the struggling farming community. Its grand, arched entrance and sturdy brick facade spoke of permanence, of institutions built to last, to serve, to safeguard the dreams of generations. Henry paused across the street, his gaze sweeping over the building. A faint, almost imperceptible frown creased his forehead, a shadow passing over his weathered features. Something felt different. The sleek, dark glass of the newly installed automatic doors reflected the morning light with an impersonal gleam, a cold, unfeeling facade. The vibrant, hand-painted sign that once adorned the entrance, depicting a bountiful wheat field under a benevolent sun, a symbol he himself had commissioned, had been replaced by a cold, metallic logo, a stark, angular design that spoke of corporate detachment, not rooted resilience. It was a subtle shift, barely noticeable to the casual observer, but to Henry, it was a glaring sign, a betrayal of the spirit within. As he crossed the street and approached the bank's entrance, the automatic doors hissed open with a cool efficiency that seemed to swallow him whole. The chill that swept over him was not just from the air conditioning. It was a premonition, a cold dread that settled deep in his bones. Inside, the atmosphere was a stark contrast to the familiar warmth of the Homestead morning. The air was cool, smelling faintly of lemon polish and a sterile, almost metallic scent he couldn't quite place, a manufactured cleanliness that purged the essence of the natural world. The floor was now polished marble, not the sturdy, practical linoleum he remembered, which had once borne the proud scuffs of countless work boots. Soft, music-like music drifted from hidden speakers, anodyne and utterly forgettable, designed to lull rather than inspire. The hum of the climate control was the loudest sound, a mechanical heartbeat replacing the vibrant pulse of human interaction he had nurtured for decades. It felt less like a community hub and more like a mausoleum for his ideals. His gaze flickered to the security guards by the entrance. Not the friendly, retired sheriff's deputies he used to employ, men who knew every farmer by name and their dogs, but younger men, stiff in their tailored charcoal suits, their eyes scanning the room with a practiced, detached vigilance, like predators in a well-manicured cage. One of them, a man with a severe, cropped haircut and an unblinking stare, met Henry's gaze and held it, a flicker of suspicion in his eyes before he subtly turned his head, dismissing Henry as inconsequential. Henry felt the weight of their judgment, an almost palpable chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. He knew this look. It was the one people reserved for those who didn't quite fit, those who might disrupt the carefully curated order of things, those deemed irrelevant in the new corporate hierarchy. It was a look that had haunted him in his youth, the very reason he had built this bank to counter. He made his way to the reception desk, a gleaming slab of dark wood that felt impossibly high, a barrier designed to distance, not welcome. A young woman with immaculate hair, styled into a severe, corporate bob, and a bright, almost artificial smile looked up from her computer screen, her expression a mask of practiced indifference. Her eyes, however, betrayed a quick, dismissive assessment of his appearance, the dusty boots, the faded shirt, the lines etched deep around his eyes from years spent under the unforgiving sun. He was a relic, an anomaly in her perfectly polished world. She barely registered him as a person, more an interruption to her carefully maintained composure. "Good morning," Henry said, his voice a low rumble worn smooth like river stones, carrying the quiet authority of one who had commanded respect for decades. "I'd like to make a withdrawal." "And do you have an appointment, sir?" she asked, her tone polite but edged with an unmistakable condescension, the words clipped and devoid of genuine warmth. She didn't bother to ask his name, didn't offer a glance at the worn face that had once defined this institution. Her perfectly manicured fingers hovered over her keyboard, but her eyes never quite met his, instead flicking over his shoulder, as if expecting someone more important, more suitably attired, to appear and displace him. It was a subtle, dismissive gesture, but it landed with the force of a physical blow to Henry's spirit. He felt the sting of it, the systemic invalidation of his presence, his history. "No, I don't," Henry replied, his patience, honed by years of coaxing life from stubborn soil, holding firm. "It's for a rather substantial amount. I have the check here." He pulled a crisp, folded check from his shirt pocket, the paper still warm from his body. It was made out to him, a simple, unadorned document that represented a significant sum, enough to finalize the purchase of the Peterson acreage, a vital tract of land he intended to secure for the local cooperative farming initiative. He had envisioned this withdrawal as a quiet, efficient act, a continuation of his stewardship, not a confrontation. The receptionist finally took the check, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the paper as she unfolded it, a tiny, almost imperceptible hesitation in her movements. Her eyes scanned the amount and a small, almost imperceptible gasp escaped her lips. Then, a quick, nervous giggle, thin and brittle, betrayed her surprise. She looked up, her smile now a little wider, a little less authentic, a flicker of feigned amusement in her gaze. A rather substantial amount, you say? Well, sir, for something of this magnitude, we usually require a prior arrangement. And frankly, she paused, her gaze sweeping him up and down again, lingering on his worn boots, on the faded patches of his jeans, on the deeply etched lines around his eyes. We don't typically keep that kind of cash on hand in this branch for walk-ins. She spoke louder than necessary, her voice carrying through the surprisingly quiet lobby, designed to draw attention, to amplify his supposed transgression. A few heads turned. A young couple waiting to open a savings account exchanged glances, their nascent dreams of prosperity momentarily overshadowed by the spectacle. A man in a pinstriped suit, engrossed in his phone, looked up, a frown of mild annoyance creasing his brow, disturbed from his self-important reverie. Henry felt the heat rising in his cheeks, not from anger, not yet, but from a quiet, internal shame, a sense of profound dissonance. This was his bank. He had envisioned it as a place of trust, of welcome, of dignity for all farmers, regardless of their current harvest or appearance, a sanctuary, not a crucible of judgment. The receptionist, clearly emboldened by the attention she had garnered, continued, her voice chirpy, but with a sharper edge, a predatory gleam in her eyes. Perhaps you'd like to speak with one of our loan officers about an overdraft or a line of credit. I'm sure we can arrange something within reason. Her words dripped with insinuation, implying he couldn't possibly possess such funds, that he must be attempting some desperate, ill-conceived measure, a con perhaps. She was openly mocking him, her gaze now fixed on the bank manager's glass-walled office, as if anticipating a savior, a corporate champion to validate her dismissiveness. Another snicker, this time from a teller behind the counter, reached his ears. It was a sharp, piercing sound that cut through the anodyne music, louder than any whisper, a cruel punctuation mark. The teller, a young man with slick-back hair and a too-tight tie, leaned over his station, sharing a joke with a colleague, his eyes darting towards Henry, a smirk twisting his lips. "Looks like someone's trying to hit the jackpot with pocket lint, eh?" he stage whispered, just loud enough for Henry and half the lobby to hear. The colleague giggled, a shrill, unpleasant sound. Henry's jaw tightened, a muscle clenching beneath the weathered skin. He held himself perfectly still, a lifetime of weathered patience preventing him from reacting with the fury that simmered beneath his calm exterior. He had seen droughts, floods, market crashes that threatened to wipe out everything he and his neighbors had built. He knew how to stand firm, but this felt different. This was not the indifference of nature or the cold logic of economics. This was a deliberate personal humiliation, a calculated insult delivered with surgical precision. The receptionist, sensing an audience fully engaged in the unfolding drama, puffed out her chest slightly, her artificial smile stretching wider. "Sir, I'm afraid we can't assist you with such an outlandish request without proper identification and verification of funds, which I doubt you possess, and certainly not without an appointment." She pushed the check back across the desk, her perfectly manicured fingers barely touching it, as if afraid to contaminate herself with the supposed poverty of its bearer. "Perhaps you should try a different establishment, one more suited to your needs." The words beggar hung unspoken in the air, a venomous echo, a branding iron searing his skin. The young teller openly laughed now, a harsh, braying sound that turned more heads across the lobby. He made a dismissive shooing gesture with his hand, as if swatting away an annoying fly. "Beat it, Grandpa." We don't hand out free cash here just because you look like you crawled out of a tractor tire." His words, laced with crude contempt, echoed in the quiet space. A few customers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their gazes flitting between Henry and the insolent staff. Some looked away quickly, embarrassed for him, or perhaps for themselves, for being silent witnesses. Others, a few younger individuals, actually snickered themselves, joining the silent chorus of contempt, emboldened by the staff's open hostility. No one, not a single soul, stepped forward to defend him, to question the treatment he was receiving in a public place. The cold, sterile environment of the bank now felt like an arena, and Henry, the old rancher, the founder, was the spectacle. He was alone, surrounded by strangers who judged him solely on the dust on his boots and the lines on his face. The very institution he had poured his life into building, the one he had envisioned as a bulwark against such heartless judgment, was now actively tearing him down, using the very people he had trusted to run it. His dignity, usually as solid and unyielding as the planes he worked, felt as if it were crumbling into dust, scattering on the polished marble floor. Just then, a sleek, immaculately dressed man emerged from a glass-walled office at the back of the lobby. This was Mark Ellison, the branch manager. He had a perfectly coiffed head of dark hair, sculpted with expensive product, a designer suit that probably cost more than Henry's pickup truck, and a sneer that seemed permanently etched into his handsome, unyielding face, a testament to his self-importance. Mark moved with an air of theatrical arrogance, his polished shoes clicking sharply on the marble, each step a declaration of superiority. He had an acute, almost predatory sense for any disruption in his perfectly ordered domain, and the hushed whispers and snickers had clearly registered as an affront to his control. "What's going on here?" Mark's voice was sharp, cutting through the background music, a whipcrack of authority. He didn't wait for an answer, his eyes immediately falling on Henry, scanning him from head to toe with an open sneer, a flicker of deep-seated disdain. "Trouble, Brenda?" he asked the receptionist, his gaze conveying a clear expectation for her to justify the disturbance, to provide a swift, tidy explanation for the unsightly blot on his pristine canvas. Brenda, relieved, quickly explained, her voice a theatrical whisper that was still easily audible, brimming with self-righteous indignation. "This gentleman, Mr. Ellison, is attempting to withdraw a rather preposterous sum without an appointment or proper verification, and his demeanor is quite disruptive." She gestured vaguely at Henry's clothes as if they were a weapon, an affront to the bank's polished aesthetic. Mark Ellison's eyes narrowed, a flicker of pure disgust passing through them, confirming his contempt for anything that didn't conform to his narrow definition of success. Preposterous indeed. He stepped closer, invading Henry's personal space, his expensive cologne, cloyingly sweet and artificial, assaulting Henry's senses, aggressively replacing the comforting scent of earth. "Sir, this is a financial institution, not a soup kitchen. We have standards here, rules. If you can't adhere to them, then I suggest you take your business elsewhere." His voice was low, meticulously controlled, but laced with a venomous condescension that chilled Henry to the bone, a deep freeze that seeped into his very soul. It was the same old song, a tune of exclusion and judgment, played on a new, colder instrument. "I am merely here to conduct a transaction," Henry stated, his voice calm, even though a tremor of indignity ran through him, threatening to unravel his composure. "A withdrawal, as a long-standing, significant shareholder." He added the last phrase quietly, almost to himself, a final, futile attempt to appeal to a logic that Ellison clearly did not possess. Mark scoffed, a short, sharp sound of pure, unadulterated contempt. "A withdrawal, with what dust bunnies and empty promises, and shareholder. Don't make me laugh, old man, look at you. You look like you just stumbled in from a forgotten back 40, not like someone who has any substantial funds to his name, let alone ownership in an institution such as this. This isn't the kind of clientele we cater to at First Agricultural Bank." He then did something that startled even the security guards, a calculated act of dominance. He reached out, placed a hand on Henry's shoulder, and pushed asterisk. It wasn't a violent shove, but a deliberate, humiliating displacement, enough to make Henry stumble back a step, forcing him off balance, both physically and emotionally. It was a clear demonstration of power, a public shaming. "Now I believe you've caused enough disruption," Mark continued, his voice rising, drawing more attention, savoring the unfolding drama. "Security, escort this gentleman off the premises, and make sure he understands that he is not welcome back without a serious change in attitude and, frankly, appearance." He punctuated his words with a dismissive flick of his hand, as if brushing away an irritating insect. The two security guards, who had been watching the scene unfold with a mixture of professional detachment and mild surprise at their manager's overt hostility, now moved in with a renewed sense of purpose. They grabbed Henry by both arms, their grip firm and unyielding, efficiently completing the humiliation. Henry offered no resistance. He had faced larger, more menacing forces in his life: blizzards, droughts, economic depressions, and he knew when to bide his time, when to conserve his strength. But the humiliation was a fresh, searing wound, a brand on his soul. He felt the eyes of the customers on him, the triumph in Mark Ellison's sneer, the snickers of the staff. He said nothing, his face a mask of silent endurance, his gaze fixed on some distant, inner horizon, as they frog-marched him towards the automatic doors, effectively sealing him out of his own creation. The cool air outside was a balm on his burning cheeks, but it did little to soothe the fire in his soul. They released him roughly on the sidewalk, practically throwing him onto the hard concrete. He landed with a jarring thud, his elbow scraping against the rough surface, a sharp pain blooming. He didn't cry out. He simply pushed himself up, slowly, methodically, his movements deliberate, imbued with a quiet, unyielding strength that defied the indignity. The automatic doors hissed shut behind him, sealing him out of the very institution he had founded, the place he had poured his lifeblood into, leaving him a pariah on its polished steps. He sat on the curb, the rough concrete cool beneath his worn denim. His shoulder ached, a dull, insistent throb, his elbow stung with a fiery protest. But the deepest pain was an invisible one, a crushing weight on his chest, a hollow void where his pride had once resided. He looked at the bank building, its grand facade now seeming to mock him, its polished glass reflecting a distorted image of his weary, dust-streaked face. He felt broken, yes, as if a vital piece of his being had been torn away, but not defeated. Not yet. The fire within him, kindled by insult, was beginning to burn brighter, a fierce, unwavering flame. His gaze drifted past the bank, across the street, to the expanse of fields that stretched beyond the town limits, disappearing into the hazy horizon, a tapestry of green and gold under the vast, indifferent sky. The land. That's where it all began. He closed his eyes and the present receded, replaced by a flood of memories. Flashbacks, vivid and raw, of a younger Henry Cole, a man with dirt under his fingernails and dreams in his heart, a relentless drive forged in the crucible of hardship. He remembered the smell of fresh-turned earth, the sting of sweat in his eyes, the deep ache in his muscles after a day's labor. It was a hard life, but an honest one that instilled a profound appreciation for resilience and the true value of what grew from the soil. He saw his father, a gaunt man with kind eyes and calloused hands, bent over a ledger, lines of worry etched deep into his face, the relentless toll of the seasons visible in every crease. The farm, their family's legacy for 3 generations, was always one bad harvest, one unexpected frost, one predatory bank loan away from foreclosure. The big banks in the city, cold and indifferent, didn't understand the cycles of agriculture, the fickle nature of weather, the sudden swings of commodity prices that could wipe out a year's work in an instant. They saw only numbers, cold, hard digits on a balance sheet, not the sweat and blood that went into coaxing life from the soil. They demanded collateral the farmers barely had, charged interest rates that felt like a choked chain, slowly strangling hope, and foreclosed at the slightest missed payment, swallowing up generations of hard work and quiet dreams with ruthless efficiency. Henry remembered the winter of '58, a particularly cruel one. It had snowed late and hard, a merciless blanket that lingered, followed by an early, devastating spring thaw that flooded the low-lying fields. His neighbor, Old Man Jenkins, a gentle giant who had worked his land since he was a boy, his face a roadmap of sun-baked furrows, lost everything. Henry, then a young man barely out of his teens, watched, helpless, as the Citibank's agents, detached and unfeeling, stripped Jenkins of his livelihood. They seized his prized Jersey cows, the very heart of his dairy operation, their mournful lowing echoing across the frozen fields. They sold off his equipment, the rusted but reliable tractor, the old plow that had tilled his grandfather's fields, the wooden barn that had stood for generations. They left him with nothing but the clothes on his back and the bitter taste of ruin. Henry saw the heartbreak in Jenkins' eyes, the quiet despair that broke something fundamental inside him, a man defeated not by the land, but by the relentless, unfeeling machinations of distant finance. That moment ignited a fire in Henry, a fierce, unyielding resolve that would define his life. "This shouldn't happen," he'd whispered to his father, who just shook his head, weary, his own spirit etched with similar battles. "That's how the world works, son. The strong eat the weak. The land gives and the banks take." But Henry refused to accept it. He saw a different way, a path less traveled, one paved not with avarice but with empathy. He envisioned a bank built by asterisk farmers, asterisk for asterisk farmers. A place that understood the rhythm of the seasons, the inherent risks, the need for patience and compassion. A financial institution that was a partner, not a predator. He spent years working on his family farm, saving every spare nickel, foregoing every luxury, educating himself in agricultural economics, devouring books on finance and community cooperatives by the dim glow of a kerosene lamp late into the night. His hands, gnarled and calloused from the day's labor, would trace the complex lines of ledgers and balance sheets, unraveling the mysteries of capital and credit. He traveled to neighboring counties, talked to other farmers, learned about cooperatives and community-funded initiatives, always listening, always absorbing, always searching for the blueprint of a better future. He saw the need, the desperate, aching need, for a financial institution that didn't just extract profit, but nurtured growth, that understood the delicate balance between risk and reward in the volatile world of agriculture. He was 27 when he finally scraped together enough seed money to present his idea. It was a modest sum, barely enough to open a storefront, let alone a bank, a laughable pittance in the eyes of the city financiers. He pitched his vision to a room full of skeptical farmers in the Grange Hall, men and women just like his father, wary of promises, scarred by experience, their faces etched with the same weariness he knew so well. He spoke not of quick riches, but of stability, of collective strength, of mutual aid, of a future where no farmer would suffer the fate of Old Man Jenkins again. He spoke of shared prosperity, of building something that would withstand the storms, both economic and literal, a bulwark against the forces that sought to strip them of their land and their dignity. "We need a bank that understands that a crop failure isn't a moral failing, but a challenge to be overcome, a test of resilience," he told them, his voice ringing with conviction, resonating with the quiet passion that had fueled his every waking hour. A bank that sees the value in the land, not just its market price. A bank that's a partner, not an adversary, a hand up, not a boot down. He painted a vivid picture of a future where local decisions, rooted in local understanding, guided financial policy, where profit was measured not just in dollars, but in thriving farms, stable families, and a robust community. Slowly, hesitantly, they began to trust him. Small investments came in. A few $100s from a dairy farmer whose herd Henry had helped through a lean winter, 1,000 from a wheat grower whose children Henry tutored in basic sums, 500 from a family who sold their prized Jersey cow, a difficult sacrifice made in faith. It was a testament to Henry's unwavering belief, his undeniable integrity, and the desperate hope he offered, a flicker of light in their long, hard struggle. He mortgaged his own share of the family farm, every acre, every stone, to provide the initial capital, a risk that terrified his parents but fueled his determination, binding his destiny irrevocably to the success of his audacious dream. The first agricultural bank of Homestead opened its doors in a converted general store, its modest facade belying the revolutionary vision it housed. Henry was its first manager and sole employee, working from dawn till long after dusk. He wore many hats: teller, loan officer, accountant, janitor. He knew every farmer by name, knew their families, their struggles, their dreams, the very texture of their lives. He would drive out to their fields in his battered pickup, sit on the tailgate, listen to their concerns, understand their specific needs, often offering a loan based as much on character and potential as on collateral. He structured repayment plans around harvest cycles, offered grace periods during droughts, and provided advice on crop diversification and soil health, understanding that true financial security was intertwined with agricultural knowledge. He wasn't just a banker, he was a community builder, a confidant, a protector of their collective future. The bank flourished, not through ruthless acquisition or predatory lending, but through organic growth, built on the bedrock of trust and shared success. Farmers prospered, expanded their operations, sent their children to college, and their success in turn strengthened the bank, creating a virtuous cycle of mutual benefit. Henry, ever the visionary, ensured that a significant portion of the bank's profits was reinvested back into the community, funding agricultural education programs, irrigation projects to mitigate drought risk, and rural infrastructure to connect isolated farms. The bank became a pillar of Homestead, a symbol of what could be achieved when people worked together, when empathy guided finance, when a vision of shared prosperity replaced the ruthless pursuit of individual gain. It was his masterpiece, a living testament to a promise made to a broken old man. Over the decades, the bank grew, expanding beyond the single branch, eventually becoming a regional institution with a robust portfolio, specializing in agricultural loans and rural development, a beacon of stability in an unpredictable world. Henry remained at its helm for most of his active life, meticulously selecting his successors, always emphasizing the core values of community, understanding, and service. He had built it to be resilient, to stand the test of time, to be a protector of the land and the people who worked it, a legacy of enduring value. But somewhere along the line, subtly, insidiously, after he had formally stepped back from day-to-day operations and moved into a more advisory role on the board, something had shifted. He had trusted the new generation, the bright young MBAs who spoke of efficiency and market share, of maximizing shareholder value, believing they would carry forward his legacy, understanding its deeper meaning. He had underestimated the insidious creep of corporate culture, the lure of easy profit over ethical practice, the dismissive arrogance that could take root when success overshadowed purpose. He'd seen the subtle changes, the increasing formality, the replacement of personal relationships with automated systems, the gradual alienation of the very people the bank was meant to serve. He tried to voice his concerns in board meetings, his wisdom, honed by decades of experience, dismissed as sentimental, outdated, an obstacle to modernization. He recalled one particularly acrimonious meeting where Ellison, then a rising star, scoffed at a proposal to extend a loan to a struggling co-op, citing unacceptable risk profiles and dilution of market performance. Henry had argued passionately for the human element, for the long-term investment in community, but his words had fallen on deaf ears, drowned out by jargon and spreadsheets. It was a slow, painful amputation of the bank's soul, and Henry, the surgeon who had brought it to life, was now powerless to stop it. He had watched, a silent sentinel, as his creation transformed into a distorted reflection of its original intent. Now, sitting on the cold curb, the midday sun high in the sky, searing his skin, he understood. The bank had become everything he had fought against. It had become a heartless machine, an extension of the very system that had nearly broken Old Man Jenkins, that had driven so many farmers to despair. And he, Henry Cole, the founder, the man who owned the controlling share, had become a stranger in his own house, an unwelcome phantom, an anachronism to be discarded. The pain of the morning's physical humiliation was eclipsed by a deeper, more profound sorrow, the betrayal of a lifetime's work, the corruption of a sacred trust. But then, a flicker of something else ignited within him, a stubborn resolve, an old fire that had never truly died, merely banked. This wasn't just about him, his scraped elbow, his bruised pride. It was about Jenkins. It was about the countless farmers he had helped, the dream of a fairer system, the legacy he had fought to establish. He couldn't let his creation, his life's purpose, be corrupted, transformed into a weapon against the very people it was meant to protect. He closed his eyes, took a deep, shuddering breath, filling his lungs with the scent of distant fields, and reached into his pocket for his phone, its old-fashioned flip design a stark contrast to the sleek devices inside the bank, a tangible link to a different era. His fingers, gnarled and strong, moved deliberately as he dialed a familiar number, a direct line to the man who understood the intricate dance of modern finance and corporate law. His son, Thomas, answered on the second ring, his voice crisp and professional, instantly recognizable as someone who navigated a world of high stakes with effortless precision. Thomas had inherited his father's quiet strength and keen intellect, but he operated in a different world, a world of international finance and corporate law, a master of the complex, often opaque systems Henry had sought to circumvent in his youth. He was Henry's legal proxy, managing a significant portion of Henry's assets and investments through an intricate web of trusts and holding companies, a formidable architect of power in his own right. "Dad, everything all right? You usually call this early only if there's a problem with the well or the cattle have broken through the north fence." Thomas's voice held a note of genuine concern, picking up on the unusual timing of the call. Henry paused, collecting his thoughts, filtering out the lingering sting of humiliation, separating the emotion from the grim, unvarnished facts. He didn't ask for revenge. That wasn't his way. He just needed to tell the truth, to lay out the facts, to spark a chain of events that would correct a profound wrong, to excise the cancer that had infected his life's work. His voice was steady, devoid of anger, but imbued with an ironclad resolve, a quiet menace that Thomas immediately recognized. "No, son, the well's fine, it's the bank. The first agricultural bank of Homestead." There was a moment of pregnant silence on the other end of the line, a sudden stillness that bespoke Thomas's instantaneous apprehension. Thomas knew his father's deep, almost spiritual connection to that institution, understood it as the very bedrock of their family's enduring legacy. "The bank? What about it, Dad? Did they finally push through that ludicrous bond initiative you opposed so vehemently?" "I just tried to make a withdrawal," Henry began, a dry, almost clinical tone in his voice, stripping the indignity down to its transactional core. A rather substantial one, the kind that requires verification apparently, even for a founder. They mistook me for, well, they called me a beggar. The manager, Mark Ellison, had me physically removed from the premises, thrown out like a common vagrant. Thomas's sharp intake of breath was audible even over the phone, a visceral reaction that spoke volumes. "They did what? Dad, are you all right? Are you hurt? Are you sure you're not exaggerating?" The concern was genuine, layered with disbelief and a rapidly escalating, cold anger. He knew his father's unflappable nature. For Henry to recount such an event, the breach of decorum must have been absolute, the disrespect profound. "I'm fine, son. A scraped elbow, nothing more. A few bruises to my dignity, perhaps, but those heal." Henry's voice was low, heavy with disappointment, a profound sadness that transcended mere physical pain. "But the bank, it's lost its way. It's forgotten its purpose. It's become everything I swore it wouldn't be. It's become a symbol of arrogance, of exclusion, precisely the institution that broke Old Man Jenkins and nearly broke our own family years ago." He paused, the weight of generations settling on his words. "It's a disgrace to the name, to the community, to the farmers it was built to serve. Dad, with all due respect, you've been saying that for years. Ever since Ellison took over and started implementing those modernization policies, cutting services to smaller farmers, focusing on high-volume corporate accounts." Thomas trailed off, his mind clearly racing, connecting the dots of his father's long-standing concerns with this egregious personal affront. "But to actually throw you out, that's an unprecedented level of hubris. A corporate suicide attempt, if ever there was one." He knew the extent of his father's ownership, the intricate web of trusts and holding companies that ensured Henry Cole remained the majority shareholder, a quiet, almost legendary figure whose true financial power was known only to a select few, including himself and a handful of senior legal counsel. "It's gone too far, Thomas," Henry said, his voice firm, leaving no room for negotiation. "I went there to withdraw funds to finalize the purchase of the Peterson acreage. You know how important that land is to the watershed and the local cooperative farming initiative. It's crucial for the long-term health of the entire county's agriculture. They not only refused, but they humiliated me in front of their staff and customers. And in doing so, they revealed exactly how far they've strayed, how deeply their arrogance has taken root. This isn't just about disrespect, son. It's about a fundamental betrayal of trust, of vision. They're jeopardizing the very foundation the bank was built upon, eroding the social capital we've spent generations building. The Peterson land, yes, I remember. We finalized the acquisition documents last week. You needed those funds accessible today to close the deal, to preempt the corporate developers who were circling." Thomas's voice was now tight, a new, steely resolve replacing the initial shock and concern. "So you want to activate the provisions then? The ultimate control clauses?" The question hung in the air, weighted with the full, devastating implications of such a move. Henry knew exactly what he meant. For years, as the bank grew and became more complex, Henry had put in place a series of clauses, legal instruments so intricate and far-reaching they were almost mythical within the firm. These provisions would allow him, as the majority shareholder, to intervene directly and decisively if the bank's core mission was ever fundamentally compromised, or if the integrity of its leadership became a liability, a threat to the community it was meant to serve. They were fail-safes, designed for an emergency exactly like this, a nuclear option he had hoped would never be needed, a guardian against the very greed he had witnessed consuming other institutions. He had built a fortress around his legacy, and now it was time to unleash its defenses. "Yes, son," Henry confirmed, his gaze fixed on the bank building, its gleaming facade now looking less like a symbol of stability and more like a tombstone for his dreams, a monument to corporate hubris. "It's time. I want you to initiate the process, immediately, and I want to be there tomorrow morning, front and center. I want to look Ellison in the eye when the truth is revealed." "Understood, Dad," Thomas replied, his voice calm now, the familiar quiet efficiency of a man accustomed to wielding significant power, to orchestrating complex legal and financial maneuvers. "Consider it done. I'll make the necessary calls. Legal team will be in motion within the hour. Expect some high-level visitors in Homestead by first light. And Dad," he added, a rare note of grim satisfaction in his tone, "Ellison won't know what hit him. He's been sailing under false colors for too long. His reign of arrogance ends tomorrow." Henry ended the call, a profound sense of quiet determination settling over him. There was no anger, no vengeful glee, just a deep, abiding conviction that justice, not retribution, was required, that the scales needed to be balanced, the bank's soul reclaimed. He rose slowly from the curb, brushed the dust from his jeans, a symbolic shedding of the morning's indignity, and began his long walk home, the ache in his shoulder a reminder of the day's profound insult, but the purpose in his heart a shield against the pain. The morning had been a test, and he had learned a bitter truth. The next day, the truth would be revealed to others, not as a whisper, but as a thunderclap that would shake the very foundations of First Agricultural Bank. The pieces were in motion, the silent machinery of power activated. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the western sky in fiery hues, Mark Ellison sat in his opulent office, a glass of expensive scotch in hand, a smug satisfaction still lingering from his triumph over the old tramp yesterday. He felt a rush of vindication, a confirmation of his belief that wealth looked a certain way, that the rough-hewn, the unpolished, were simply not worthy of the polished halls of finance he now commanded. His phone buzzed with a message from Brenda, the receptionist. Mr. Cole's son Thomas called, asking about a substantial withdrawal. Sounded agitated. I told him we handled it. Ellison scoffed, dismissing it as a disgruntled relative making a nuisance call. Another family of farmers unable to grasp modern banking, he muttered, taking a long sip. He saw an opportunity, a chance to solidify his position further. He had a contentious board meeting approaching, where some older, more conservative board members, remnants of Henry's era, had raised concerns about his aggressive expansion into speculative real estate loans. He decided to push through a new, lucrative, but highly risky land development deal in a neighboring county, a deal that would net him a significant personal bonus and further marginalize the agricultural focus of the bank. He'd frame it as vital for diversification. This would be his defiant answer to any whispers of discontent, a move to prove his visionary leadership. He sent immediate instructions to his legal team to prepare the documents for a special, unscheduled board vote early next week, confident in his power. Meanwhile, miles away, in the hushed, minimalist office of a prestigious corporate law firm in Capital City, Thomas Cole worked through the night. The phone call from his father had ignited a cold fury within him, a righteous indignation that transcended professional detachment. He assembled his elite team, their faces grim under the harsh glare of task lighting. Ellison has just greenlit a speculative real estate deal in Sterling County, bypassing due diligence, Thomas stated, his voice tight with controlled urgency. He's trying to preempt any action we take, to tie up capital and create irreversible liabilities. His arrogance is a cancer. The legal team, a formidable assembly of sharp minds, went into overdrive, fueled by caffeine and an almost reverent loyalty to the Cole family. They meticulously reviewed the ultimate control clauses, the intricate web of legal instruments Henry had meticulously woven into the bank's founding documents. These weren't just standard shareholder rights. They were a labyrinth of checks and balances, emergency powers designed for precisely this kind of hostile internal takeover by a rogue executive. Every detail was analyzed, every potential counterargument from Ellison's highly paid lawyers anticipated. They unearthed a forgotten bylaw, a clause Henry had inserted decades ago, granting the majority shareholder immediate, unilateral authority to call an emergency board meeting and implement corrective measures in cases of demonstrable moral turpitude or systemic financial mismanagement. It was a legal weapon of unparalleled potency, silent until now. Thomas authorized the immediate dispatch of the official notices, hand-delivered by private couriers, to every board member. He also activated a complex, covert financial audit, leveraging Henry's vast, understated influence within the regulatory bodies. The chessboard was set, its pieces poised for a brutal, dawn-lit checkmate. Ellison won't be able to move, Thomas murmured to his lead counsel, not a single pawn. The next morning dawned bright and clear, almost deceptively serene. the sun casting long, tranquil shadows over Homestead. Inside the First Agricultural Bank, the same staff bustled about, completely oblivious to the seismic shift about to occur. Brenda, the receptionist, was polishing her already immaculate desk, humming along to the unobtrusive music, lost in the mundane rhythm of her morning routine. The slick-haired teller, whose laugh had echoed through the lobby the day before, was chatting idly with a colleague about weekend plans, entirely unaware that his world was about to be irrevocably shattered. And Mark Ellison, resplendent in a new, even sharper suit, a custom-tailored declaration of his perceived triumph, was reviewing reports in his glass-walled office, a smug satisfaction still lingering from his calculated victory over the old tramp. Yesterday, he felt a rush of vindication, a confirmation of his belief that wealth looked a certain way, that the rough-hewn were simply not worthy of the polished halls of finance, that the past could be effortlessly erased by the present. He envisioned his future, an ascent to the corporate headquarters, leaving Homestead and its rustic problems far behind. The first sign that something was amiss came subtly, a ripple across the calm surface of the bank's meticulously maintained order. The usual flow of morning customers seemed to hesitate at the automatic doors, their eyes drawn to something outside, something incongruous with the quiet town. Then, the rhythmic thrum of powerful engines grew louder, a deep, resonant growl, approaching the bank with an almost deliberate menace. A few heads turned, then more. Brenda frowned, glancing up from her desk, her humming abruptly ceasing. The quiet hum of the bank was now pierced by the low, insistent roar of approaching power. Then the first sleek, black SUV, an imposing Cadillac Escalade with tinted, impenetrable windows, pulled up to the curb directly in front of the bank. Its polished chrome glinted menacingly in the morning sun, hinting at the importance and the imperviousness of its occupants. Before it had fully stopped, another followed, then a third, parking in a neat, intimidating line along the sidewalk, a black procession of unyielding authority. The sun glinted off their chrome accents, an almost blinding flash of power, a visual declaration that something extraordinary and perhaps terrifying was unfolding. From the first SUV, a man in an impeccably tailored dark suit, his face unreadable, his posture radiating coiled power, emerged. He was followed by another, equally imposing figure, a woman whose ramrod-straight posture and sharp, intelligent eyes commanded instant attention, carrying a slim, leather-bound briefcase like a weapon. They moved with an air of quiet, undeniable authority, their presence instantly changing the atmosphere outside the bank, a sudden shift in the very air pressure. The general hum of town life seemed to dim, replaced by a sudden, nervous silence, a collective holding of breath. Inside, Brenda's humming stopped. The chattering tellers went quiet, their forced smiles evaporating. Mark Ellison, alerted by the sudden, unnatural hush, glanced up from his computer screen, a flicker of confusion in his eyes, his self-satisfied reverie disturbed. He watched through the glass of his office as the three figures approached the bank's automatic doors. He didn't recognize any of them, but their bearing, their expensive clothes, the sheer coordinated precision of their arrival, screamed corporate, not the usual local patrons. These were not the farmers he despised, nor the local gentry he cultivated. These were players from a different, far more dangerous game. The doors hissed open, and the trio stepped inside, their presence a palpable force that swept through the lobby like a cold front. Their eyes swept over the room, missing nothing, assessing everything, their expressions utterly devoid of warmth, of any human pleasantry. They moved directly towards Brenda's desk, their footsteps unnervingly silent on the marble, each step echoing the impending doom. "Good morning," the first man said, his voice deep and measured, completely devoid of pleasantries, a voice accustomed to being obeyed. "We are here for an unscheduled board meeting. My name is Arthur Vance. This is Miss Eleanor Albright and Mr. Robert Maxwell. We represent the primary shareholder." He held up an official-looking badge, its metallic sheen glinting, Arthur Vance. The name, whispered in the hushed halls of finance, sent a cold tendril of apprehension through Mark Ellison. Vance was a legendary figure in regional finance, known for his ruthless efficiency, his surgical precision, and his direct access to the highest echelons of power, a man who moved mountains with a single directive. Brenda, completely flustered, her carefully constructed composure dissolving, stammered, "An unscheduled board meeting. Sir, Mr. Ellison doesn't have anything on his calendar, and the board usually meets quarterly in the corporate headquarters in Capital City." Her voice was a nervous squeak, barely audible. "Today, the board meets here," Miss Albright interjected, her voice sharp as glass, cutting through Brenda's protest with effortless authority. "And it will be a full meeting. Please inform Mr. Ellison that his presence is required immediately in his office. And for the duration of this meeting, no one is to enter or leave this bank without our express permission. All transactions are suspended until further notice." Her gaze, flint-sharp, dared Brenda to question the command. Brenda's jaw dropped, her face a mask of dawning horror. The staff exchanged panicked glances, their earlier nonchalance replaced by a profound, chilling dread. The slick-haired teller quickly disappeared behind a stack of forms, trying to make himself invisible. Mark Ellison, who had watched the entire exchange from his office, felt a knot of ice forming in his stomach, a cold, clenching fear. Vance, Albright, Maxwell, these were not minor players. This was serious. This was a hostile takeover, a corporate coup orchestrated with chilling precision. He quickly composed himself, straightened his expensive tie, and stepped out, projecting an air of confident authority he didn't quite feel, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Mr. Vance, Miss Albright, Mr. Maxwell," Mark began, attempting a smooth, professional greeting, extending his hand, a desperate bid for control. "Mark Ellison, branch manager. To what do we owe this unexpected visit? Is there some urgent matter I can assist with?" Arthur Vance didn't take his hand. His eyes, cold and assessing, simply pierced through Mark, stripping away his facade of confidence. "Mr. Ellison, perhaps you should refrain from further comment for now. Your ignorance of proper protocol, and indeed of the very individual standing before you, is precisely why we are here. Your office, if you please." His tone left no room for defiance, no space for Mark's usual bluster. Mark's extended hand fell awkwardly to his side, his face tightening with a mixture of confusion and a rapidly escalating terror. He had anticipated a challenge, perhaps even an investigation into his unauthorized land deal, but not this. This felt existential. As Mark reluctantly led them into his office, the glass door clicking shut behind him, a tense, unsettling silence descended upon the lobby, heavy and suffocating. Staff whispered nervously, their eyes darting towards the sealed office. Customers, now openly curious and increasingly agitated, started to get up, some attempting to leave, only to be stopped by the grim-faced security detail that had discreetly positioned itself by the entrance, holding firm to Miss Albright's earlier instruction. A palpable sense of dread hung in the air, a silent anticipation of the hammer blow about to fall, a profound shift in the power dynamics of the First Agricultural Bank. Just as the tension reached its peak, a suffocating weight in the quiet lobby, the automatic doors hissed open once more, and in walked Henry Cole. He wore the same simple, dust-flecked clothes as the day before, the faded chambray shirt, the patched jeans, the worn-out boots. But today, his posture was different. There was an understated dignity in his stride, a quiet power that seemed to ripple through the room, silencing the last vestiges of nervous murmurs. His gaze was steady, his eyes calm, almost piercing, as he swept over the now frozen faces in the lobby, each one a canvas of dawning realization and palpable fear. He didn't look at the staff with anger or triumph, but with a profound sadness, a look that spoke of betrayal and disappointment, of a dream corrupted and now, finally, to be reclaimed. He was not a beggar. He was a force of nature, an embodiment of the land itself, now walking into its heart, into his own heart, to restore order. Brenda gasped, a choked sound, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with a dawning horror that twisted her features. The slick-haired teller went pale, his bravado of yesterday dissolving into sheer terror, recognizing the old tramp they had humiliated with such casual cruelty. The security guards, the very men who had dragged Henry out, now stood rigid, their eyes wide with confusion and a dawning horror, their professional detachment shattering under the weight of an unimaginable truth. They had desecrated a living legend. Henry walked slowly, deliberately towards Mark Ellison's office, each step measured, echoing with the weight of decades. As he approached the glass wall, the three executives inside, along with Mark, looked up, their conversation abruptly silenced. Mark's face, already tight with apprehension, contorted into a mask of pure disbelief and fury as he recognized Henry. He started to rise, clearly intending to confront him, perhaps even order him removed again, driven by a last, desperate surge of his shattered authority. But before Mark could utter a word, Arthur Vance held up a hand, a silent command that froze Mark in place, a puppeteer controlling his unwitting puppet. Vance's eyes, previously focused on Mark with cold assessment, now shifted to Henry, and an unmistakable change came over his demeanor. The rigid professionalism softened, replaced by a look of deep respect, almost reverence, a subtle dip of the head, a gesture of profound deference. He gave Henry a slight, deferential nod, a silent acknowledgement of true power. Henry returned the nod, a silent acknowledgement that transcended words, a shared understanding between titans. He walked directly to the closed glass door, and Miss Albright, without a word, her movements precise and deferential, reached out and opened it for him. He stepped inside, joining the small, somber gathering, the air thick with unspoken tension. The door closed behind him, sealing off the frantic questions and growing panic from the lobby, a clear demarcation between the old order and the new. Inside, the atmosphere crackled with unspoken tension, a static charge that seemed to electrify the air. Mark Ellison stared at Henry, his face a grotesque mixture of confusion, rage, and a rapidly escalating terror that bleached his complexion. What is this? What is he doing here? He's a nobody. I had him removed yesterday. He sputtered, his voice laced with indignation, even as a cold dread began to gnaw at his insides, twisting his gut. He lunged forward, a primal instinct to defend his rapidly crumbling kingdom. Arthur Vance turned slowly to Mark, his expression grim, his gaze utterly devoid of sympathy. "Mr. Ellison, perhaps you should refrain from further comment for now. Your ignorance of proper protocol, and indeed of the very individual standing before you, is precisely why we are here. Your judgment, Mr. Ellison, is fatally flawed." He then turned to Henry, his voice softening, imbued with respectful reverence. "Mr. Cole, if you please, we're ready. The hour of reckoning is upon us." Henry said nothing to Mark. His gaze, calm but piercing, rested on the broken man for a moment, a silent weight of decades of observation. He simply pulled a single sheet of paper from his shirt pocket, the same pocket from which he'd produced his withdrawal check the day before, a gesture heavy with symbolism. It wasn't a check this time. It was a formal, impeccably drafted document bearing the seals of powerful legal entities. Miss Albright took it, her movements precise, almost ritualistic, and handed it to Arthur Vance. Vance glanced at it, then passed it to Robert Maxwell. The document was a formal notification of the immediate termination of Mark Ellison's employment, effective immediately, signed by the majority shareholder. It also contained directives for a full audit of his tenure, a forensic examination of every decision, and a sweeping reevaluation of current bank policies, a complete dismantling of his corrupt legacy. Vance then produced a thick, official-looking binder, bound in dark leather, heavy with the weight of incontrovertible truth. He opened it, revealing a series of meticulously organized documents, share certificates, trust agreements, and legal mandates, all bearing Henry Cole's name, each page a nail in Mark Ellison's corporate coffin. He placed the binder on Mark's desk, directly in front of Mark, ensuring the man could not avoid the devastating evidence. "Mr. Ellison," Vance stated, his voice devoid of emotion, a cold, surgical pronouncement, "I believe it is time for a full and complete reveal of the true ownership structure of the First Agricultural Bank of Homestead. While the general public and even some of our mid-level executives might perceive a diffused ownership, a complex web of holdings, the fact remains that a single entity, through various investment vehicles and trusts, retains majority control. A silent hand has guided this institution for over 50 years. He tapped a finger on a document, a certified statement of holdings, its text crisp and undeniable. And that entity, Mr. Ellison, is none other than Mr. Henry Cole. The man you so casually dismissed as a vagrant, the man you physically removed from his own bank, is the very founder, the very soul, and the absolute master of this institution." The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable, each syllable a hammer blow against Mark's carefully constructed reality. Mark Ellison's face, already pale, drained of all remaining color, becoming an ashen canvas of utter devastation. His eyes, wide and disbelieving, darted from Vance to the documents, then back to Henry, who stood silently, observing him with a gaze that held neither malice nor triumph, only profound, aching disappointment, the weight of a betrayed legacy. "No," Mark whispered, his voice cracking, a pathetic whimper of denial. "That's impossible. He's just an old farmer. He looked like he didn't have a dime. He barely had 2 coins to rub together, I thought. This is a trick." He clawed at the documents, as if to tear apart the fabric of this impossible reality. "And that, Mr. Ellison," Miss Albright interjected, her voice sharp as glass, cutting through his protest, "is precisely the problem. You and many others in this institution have forgotten the core values upon which this bank was founded. You judge wealth by appearance, by superficial display, by the cut of a suit, rather than by its true substance, its ethical purpose, or the integrity of the man who wields it. Mr. Cole didn't just found this bank, he owns it. Every brick, every dollar, every share. He built it from the ground up to serve the very people you despise. To dismiss him as a beggar and physically remove him from his own institution is not only a profound breach of conduct, it is an act of corporate suicide, a betrayal of everything this bank was meant to be. It is an act of grotesque, unforgivable hubris." Robert Maxwell, who had remained silent until now, spoke, his voice resonating with an unyielding authority that brooked no argument. "Mr. Cole, in his capacity as majority shareholder and the very visionary behind this institution, has invoked the terms of his ultimate control. Effective immediately, Mr. Ellison, your employment with the First Agricultural Bank of Homestead is terminated. You will gather your personal effects under the supervision of security. All company property, including your bank access cards, company phone, and computer, will be surrendered to Mr. Vance. A full audit of your financial decisions and management practices during your tenure will commence today, reaching back to your first day. And we assure you, Mr. Ellison, no stone will be left unturned. Every questionable loan, every bypass protocol, every dismissed employee will be scrutinized." Mark Ellison stumbled backward, collapsing into his chair, the sudden shock draining his legs of all strength. His perfectly coiffed hair seemed to wilt. His designer suit suddenly looked cheap, ill-fitting, the fabric hanging limply on his suddenly deflated frame. The smug sneer that had been his permanent expression vanished, replaced by a gaping, horrified realization, a terror that hollowed out his features. He looked at Henry, his eyes pleading, desperate, utterly shattered, a man undone. The powerful, arrogant manager was now a hollow shell, his reign of false authority brutally extinguished. He was exposed, ruined, stripped bare. Henry finally spoke, his voice calm but with an underlying steel that commanded absolute attention, reverberating through the stunned silence of the office. "I built this bank," he said, his gaze fixed on Mark, a quiet, unyielding judgment in his eyes. I built it for farmers, for families, for the community that feeds us all, not for self-serving ambition, not for profit margins that forget the human cost, and certainly not for managers who treat people like dirt because of the clothes on their backs. I built it for dignity, for respect, for a hand up, not a boot down. He paused, his eyes sweeping over the silent, terrified faces of the staff pressed against the glass wall of the office, straining to hear every devastating word, their own complicity now a heavy burden. "This bank," Henry continued, his voice echoing with the weight of decades, with the truth of a sacred trust, was born from a vision of partnership, of understanding the cycles of the land, of providing a safe harbor for those who work it, those who nurture the very lifeblood of our nation. It was built on trust, on dignity, on respect. Those are the cornerstones, not polished marble, not designer suits, and certainly not arrogance that blinds you to the soul of an institution. He turned back to Mark, his gaze unwavering. "Your actions yesterday, Mr. Ellison, were not merely disrespectful to me. They were disrespectful to everything this bank was supposed to stand for. They were a profound betrayal of its very soul, a defilement of a legacy forged in sweat and hope." Vance stepped forward, his voice firm, leaving no doubt about the finality of the decision. "Mr. Ellison, please gather your belongings. You have 5 minutes. Security will be waiting for you outside, and they will escort you off the premises. Your access will be revoked immediately. Any attempt to access company systems will be met with immediate legal action." Mark Ellison, completely broken, pushed himself up from his chair, his movements clumsy, robotic. He didn't even look at Henry as he stumbled past, grabbing a cardboard box from his office cabinet and beginning to frantically stuff his desk items into it, his hands shaking, his face a mask of profound, public humiliation. He was a defeated man, stripped of his power, his reputation, his carefully constructed facade shattered into a million pieces. The executives then stepped out into the lobby, Henry following closely behind, his quiet presence now radiating an authority that dwarfed any of the high-powered financiers. Arthur Vance held up a hand, silencing the murmurs that had begun to rise from the stunned staff. "Attention, staff," he announced, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed lobby, each word a pronouncement of a new era. "As of this moment, Mr. Mark Ellison is no longer employed by the First Agricultural Bank of Homestead. His dismissal is effective immediately, due to gross misconduct and a profound dereliction of duty, a complete failure to uphold the foundational principles of this institution." A collective gasp went through the staff, a wave of shock and dawning comprehension. Brenda looked as though she might faint, clutching her chest, her face blotchy red. The slick-haired teller, now cowering behind a potted plant, tried desperately to melt into the wall, to become invisible. The security guards, whose faces were grim with the dawning realization of their monumental error, stood at rigid attention, their eyes fixed on Henry, now understanding the true cost of their complicity. Henry stepped forward, his figure, though unassuming, now radiating an authority that dwarfed any of the executives, any of the previous power brokers. His presence commanded the full, unwavering attention of every single person in the bank. He looked at Brenda, whose face was blotchy red, tears welling in her eyes, a silent plea for forgiveness. He looked at the slick-haired teller, now a cowering shadow. He looked at the security guards, their faces grim with the dawning realization of their monumental error, their once impassive masks now etched with profound regret. "This bank was built for people like me," Henry said, his voice calm, clear, and resonating with a quiet power that filled the vast space, reaching into every corner, every conscience. "It was built to nurture our community, to support our farms, to understand the struggles of those who put food on our tables. It was built to uplift, not to humiliate them. It was built to stand as a pillar of trust, not a fortress of arrogance, not a monument to superficiality." He paused, letting his words sink in, a lifetime of integrity and purpose behind them, a living history lesson delivered with devastating simplicity. My expectation moving forward is simple. Every person who walks through these doors, whether in a suit or in dusty boots, whether they hold 1,000 shares or are simply trying to make ends meet, will be treated with the dignity and respect they deserve. This bank will return to its original mission. It will return to its roots. It will be a partner to the land and its people once more. This is not a suggestion. That is a directive. His eyes, though old, held a sharpness that promised no compromise, a silent, unwavering command that permeated the very foundations of the bank. The transformation in the lobby was immediate and absolute. The sterile atmosphere, which had felt so cold and impersonal, was suddenly charged with a different kind of energy, one of humbled understanding, of dawning fear, and a glimmer of hope. The staff, shaken to their core, now looked at each other with a new, sober awareness, a profound understanding of their past transgressions and the weight of their future responsibilities. The bank had been shaken, not by an earthquake, but by the quiet, unyielding power of its true foundation, finally reasserting itself. Henry Cole, the silent founder, had spoken, and the echo would reverberate through the halls of First Agricultural Bank for years to come. The era of arrogance was over. The era of purpose had returned, stark and uncompromising. Months later, the First Agricultural Bank of Homestead bore little resemblance to the cold, impersonal institution it had become under Mark Ellison. The polished marble floor still gleamed, but the atmosphere was warmer, more inviting, infused with a renewed sense of purpose and genuine human connection. The anodyne music had been replaced by the quiet hum of respectful conversation, the occasional, genuine laughter of a teller interacting with a long-time customer. The sterile scent of lemon polish had given way to the faint, earthy aroma of fresh-cut flowers placed on a polished counter, a small, yet significant detail that spoke volumes about the new ethos. The new branch manager, a seasoned veteran of rural banking whom Henry himself had mentored decades ago, moved with an easy, approachable grace, often greeting farmers by name, asking about their crops, their families, their struggles, a familiar, comforting presence. New programs, spearheaded by Henry in his advisory capacity, had been launched. Low-interest loans for sustainable farming practices, scholarships for local kids pursuing agricultural degrees, and an expanded community outreach initiative that saw bank representatives actively visiting farms, understanding needs firsthand, a true return to Henry's original vision. The Peterson acreage, secured by Henry's swift intervention, was now thriving as a cooperative farm, a testament to the bank's renewed commitment to its founding principles. The bank was once again a living, breathing part of the community, not a detached corporate entity. Henry still came to town for supplies, for a haircut, for his regular coffee at Peggy's Plates, savoring the renewed sense of belonging. He still wore his comfortable, worn clothes, his dust-flecked boots, symbols of his authenticity and connection to the land. But now, when he walked into the bank, the automatic doors hissed open not with cold indifference, but with a silent welcome. The new guards, respectful and alert, would offer a deferential nod, their eyes acknowledging his true stature. The receptionists, now carefully trained and genuinely empathetic, would smile warmly and ask how they could help, their eyes meeting his with genuine regard, recognizing him not as a potential nuisance, but as the quiet patriarch of their revived institution. Today, Henry wasn't there for a withdrawal, nor to enforce a directive. He was there to check on the progress of a new community outreach program, one that provided specialized microloans for aspiring young farmers and developed drought-resistant crop initiatives. He sat in the manager's office, discussing progress, the air imbued with quiet competence, a stark contrast to the stifling arrogance that had once permeated the space. His heart swelled with a quiet satisfaction, a profound sense of having reclaimed what was lost. As he was leaving, a familiar, desperate figure appeared in the doorway, escorted by one of the bank's now reassigned security personnel, a man who once guarded Ellison with unthinking loyalty. It was Mark Ellison, Mark looked a shadow of his former self. His expensive suit, once sharp and tailored, was wrinkled and ill-fitting, his designer haircut disheveled, his eyes hollowed and haunted, reflecting months of professional and personal ruin. The pride that had once puffed out his chest was gone, replaced by a visible slump of defeat. His shoulders bowed under the crushing weight of his catastrophic fall from grace. He was clearly here for some final, humiliating errand, perhaps to collect a last severance check, a paltry sum compared to his past excesses, or to sign documents related to his ongoing audit, which had uncovered a network of self-serving financial irregularities and dubious dealings. His public dismissal had been merely the first tremor in an earthquake that had swallowed his entire life. Mark's eyes, dulled by months of professional and personal ruin, landed on Henry. For a moment, a flicker of the old anger, the raw resentment, sparked in their depths, a desperate, dying ember of his former arrogance. But it quickly died, extinguished by the overwhelming reality of his new situation and the undeniable, quiet power of the man before him. He was no longer the arrogant manager, the self-proclaimed master of finance, and Henry was no longer the poor, old man to be scorned, but the true architect of power, the silent, unassailable force he had so fatally underestimated. The roles had been irrevocably reversed, a complete and devastating symmetrical catharsis. Henry met Mark's gaze. There was no triumph in Henry's eyes, no gloating, no satisfaction in the man's suffering, just a deep, abiding calm and a profound sense of closure. He saw the broken man before him, saw the wreckage of a life built on superficiality and contempt, saw the emptiness where ambition had once burned, and felt a quiet sorrow, not for Mark, but for the wasted potential, the corruption of a human spirit that could have contributed to something greater. The cost of arrogance laid bare. "Mr. Ellison," Henry said, his voice soft, almost a murmur, yet carrying the undeniable weight of all that had transpired, of the lessons learned and the justice rendered. "I hope you have learned the true value of respect and the true meaning of wealth." He didn't elaborate, didn't need to. The words hung in the air, a final, unassailable judgment, a quiet pronouncement of irreversible truth. Mark Ellison said nothing. He simply stared, his jaw slack, his eyes fixed on Henry's, a silent acknowledgement of the unassailable truth in Henry's words. He had been stripped of everything, his position, his reputation, his carefully constructed illusion of power, his very identity. And the man who had brought about his downfall, the man he had scorned, now stood before him, embodying the very dignity and quiet strength Mark had so arrogantly dismissed. The silence stretched, a chasm between two vastly different futures. Then Mark lowered his gaze, unable to meet Henry's steady stare, his defeat absolute, and the security guard gently guided him away, out of the bank, and out of Henry's life for good. Henry watched him go, then turned, a quiet satisfaction settling in his heart. The bank, his legacy, was safe. Its soul had been reclaimed, its roots re-entrenched in the rich, dark earth of community and purpose. And so, their destiny was forged, a new legacy built from the ashes of the old. Their story now belongs to time, but its power only grows if shared. The greatest riches are not those accumulated in vaults, but those invested in people, in community, in a vision of genuine service and respect. But as one man breaks the system, another is trapped by it, and the seeds of injustice continually seek new ground. How many untold stories of quiet power and hidden wealth still wait to reshape our world, defying expectations and revealing uncomfortable truths beneath the polished facades of power. If this journey marked your soul, leave a like and subscribe. For the best stories are those that refuse to die in silence, their echoes shaping the very landscape of our future.